Hi, I'm Eric Lanask. We are here at our Santa Clara Editors Days. With me in the studio now is Ann Bonaparte from BrightPoint Security. Ann, thanks for joining me.
You're welcome. Thanks for inviting me.
Security, obviously an important topic, a critical topic, one that hasn't always gotten as much focus as it has. Where are we in terms of an understanding within the enterprise about what kind of security standards there have to be in place?
Well, security's, I think, definitely been elevated in terms of importance in an organization, and it really now is a board-level conversation, which a couple years ago was not there. Certainly the traditional stacks, and I think there's a very high level of understanding within an organization about what's going on. But, as a young company in the industry, I'd say as an overall industry, we're a little bit failing because threats are up 49% this year. And so, keeping adding bricks to the perimeter isn't really working. So I think there's recognition within enterprise and the government that we need to take some different approaches and think differently about how we protect our data, our enterprise data, our consumers' data.
Well, on the one hand, the challenge is that the bad guys are always going to be a little bit ahead of us because they don't have to play by the same rules that we do. But that aside, what are some of these new approaches?
Right. Well, you're right. The bad guys are really good at a lot of things. They have, whole industries that are very structured, and it's amazing. But, we can get ahead of them because they've been collaborating for a long time. And so one of the new ideas, and really what BrightPoint's based on, is recognizing that the good guys should collaborate. And we need to figure out how can we share threat intelligence and do it in a way that's safe, keeps the data resident, no attribution, and enable us, for me, to be able to say, hey, I'm seeing this, or you, and being able to share that information in an immediate way so we can take immediate action. And that's really the foundation of what BrightPoint's all about. And it's one of the big ideas that I think the industry is recognizing, and the government is too, with some of their recent initiatives.
So the idea sort of being then putting the greater good above the individual company good.
Well, it's actually not that. No, because, if you're the security guy, you're hired for one thing and one thing only, and that's protect your organization. So that is your job one. Well, what you recognize is that just getting threat intelligence from external sources, it's just you're always chasing it, like you described. But if you can partner together with peers in your industry and say, let's actually share what I'm seeing, what you're sharing. So number one, I'm protecting my organization. Or number two, I can help you say, if you're seeing this, maybe I'll get an early look at it and you can tell me, or I might do the same. And what's really important, if you think about enterprises today, they have a whole digital supply chain that they're in business with, right? There's no, we don't operate alone anymore, and we have networks. And so those supply chains are very much at risk, and we're seeing that with breaches. And so those very much sharing information across those digital supply chains is what BrightPoint's all about.
What is the reception to that sort of thought process, to the collaborative security process?
Right. Well, if you asked me 10 years ago, I would have said, hey, almost an oxymoron, right?
Right.
But no, I think there's recognition, just like it's really been happening offline at, Wednesday nights at the bar. We might meet for a beer and say, hey, what are you seeing? What are some of the trends? Because you and I are both security professionals. So that was always happening in an informal way. But now we have machine learning and the opportunity to really apply very deep analytics to sharing information across networks and keeping the data resident, keeping it safe, and only sharing the indicator and the sighting and the timing. And that enables this whole area of sharing threat information for action to happen. And I think there's absolute recognition of the benefit of that, and we're seeing a great uptake in folks embracing this kind of technology.
So what is BrightPoint's role in the whole process?
Well, we offer a solution that sits within the enterprise or within the government organization that enables you to pinpoint what threats you should pay attention to and which you can park away and not really deal with, which are most relevant. We provide the context around what's going on within your digital supply chain, and that might elevate the importance, because if other threats are right there, you need to pay more attention to those and those that haven't hit. And we give you actually a predictive insight, a weather map of what are the threats headed your way in your supply chain that you need to actually take proactive defense. So that's what we're about, is providing technology that enables you to have that pinpointed accuracy on what to focus on next for a security professional.
What constitutes a threat that you wouldn't have to pay as much attention to or may not have to act on right away?
Well, it's interesting. Threats are a little bit like the stock market, right? They go up, they go down, they become relevant and not. And so a threat you wouldn't have to pay attention to is maybe one you heard about in an open source feed or maybe even from the FBI, but it's perhaps targeted for a financial institution, but you're a healthcare institution and you have no sightings and your supply chain isn't hitting it, and it's perhaps 4 weeks old, and the bad guys really put aside threats and take on a new one. So they have a life of their own, and so it's very important to understand the velocity of threats to really identify the relevance. So, and in most environments right now for enterprises, it's hard for them to distill the relevant and not, and that's what we do.
Does that still leave, if you're, the understanding is that you may be able to ignore that, does it still leave you at risk?
Well, it leaves you at risk if you indeed have sightings with your environment, but what we do is we ingest all sorts of structured and unstructured data and then correlate it with what's going on in your endpoint technology, what's going on in your repositories, your SIMs, and we identify relevance. So if there could be a threat identifier, an indicator of compromise, but if it's not in your environment and it's not in your digital supply chain through that kind of query, then you don't need to pay attention to it right now. If you feel it might be coming your way, you can rerun that every periodic time. So you are able to relax because you'll be able to do another run through on a periodic basis. So I think it enables you to really focus on the threats that make sense to prioritize for your SOC team or your analysts.
Understand your opponent so you can win the game.
Absolutely. And and just working together to get a little bit ahead of the bad guy, but protecting your organization first.
How do you foresee the security landscape changing? We talked a little bit about where it's come, in the next couple of years. Where do you see it headed?
Well, I see just a huge amount of data overload already. I mean, you interview chief information security officers, and almost 80% say their job's harder today than 2 years ago. And the threat surface area has increased, and the number of threats attacking them have increased. And so that means the amount of data has increased. So what I see in the future is the need for platforms like BrightPoint that act as kind of a transform to be able to ingest all this data from all this new great technology and really make sense of it. Again, distilling it down, pinpointing what pays attention. And you mentioned IoT when we began our conversation, and all those connected devices are going to bring lots of data. So the BrightPoint platform will be able to ingest some great indicators from great technology vendors who are focused on IoT, and we can bring that into the mix. But that is another wave that's about to hit enterprises, and so having a central place to really pinpoint what to pay attention to and what not to is critical.
How do you deploy within the enterprise?
Well, we deploy as a virtual machine, so it's an all-in-one package, and that could be within your perimeter on-premise, or if you have a private cloud, it goes in there, public cloud, it goes in there, hybrid, which is really where it's all going, at least the majority. And so our virtual machine operates within your environment, so your data always stays resident. We have 4 patents to ensure that how we share the analytics, we're only sharing indicator of compromise, timing, and sightings, and never would any attribution from your organization ever go out. It's impossible to reverse engineer that. And we're really proud of that because our solution is built by security practitioners who sat in the seat, and so we know how important it is. Your data needs to stay resident, again, wherever that is, in the cloud or on-prem.
Excellent. Certainly sounds very exciting.
It's incredibly fun because we believe we're going to be able to turn the tide and really begin to get ideally one step ahead of the bad guys, so they're not always a step ahead of us.
I think there are a lot of us out there that certainly hope you're able to do that. Ann, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.